Friends, welcome to the third session of the day. Today, the session is held by Dr. S.K. Hafizul Islam. He received his MSc degree in Applied Mathematics from Vidyasagar University, Midanpur in 2006 and MTech degree in Computer Applications and PhD degree in Computer Science and Engineering in 2009 and 2013 respectively from IIT Dhanbad under the Inspire Fellowship PhD program. He is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in IIT Kalyani, West Bengal. Before joining the IIT Kalyani, he was an assistant professor with the Department of Computer Science and Information System, BITS, Pilani. He has more than 7 years of teaching and 10 years of research experience. He has authored and co-authored 125 research papers in journals and conference proceedings of international reputes. His research interests includes cryptography, information security, neural cryptography, IoT, blockchain security, and deep learning. Presently, he is editing 4 books for the publishers Wiley, Elsevier, and CRC Press. He is an associate editor for IEEE Journal of Biomedical and Health Informatics, IEEE Transitions on Intelligent Transportation System, IEEE System Journal, IEEE Access, International Journal of Communication System, WILI, Telecommunication System Springer, IET Wireless Sensor System, and many more. He was a receiver in many reputed international journals and conferences. He was the recipient of University Gold Medal, the S.D. Singha Memorial Endowment Gold Medal, and the Savitri Parya Memorial Endowment Gold Medal from Vidyasagar University in 2006. He was also the recipient of University Gold Medal from IIT Dhanbad in 2009 and the Opera Award from BITS Pilani in 2015. He is a senior member of IEEE and also a member of ACM. Sir, Hafizul Islam sir, we welcome you to the third session of the day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you to all. And I think, am I audible to all? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
My screen is visible, slide?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks to the organizer. This is a nice opportunity for me to present some of my key research domain in the area of information security. So today I'm going to discuss with the following agenda. So first I will talk about the model for secure communication, and then I will talk about one of the old crypto system, that is certificate authority based public key crypto system, or better to say it is CAPKI. And I will give certain crypto system in this system. So like Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol and its improvements, and also we will discuss about the public key infrastructures and the requirements. And then we'll move to one new crypto system that is called the identity based crypto system, and we'll give the example of the identity based encryption, one of the famous crypto system that is designed by the Boney and Franklin. So we'll discuss one issue with this crypto system. Then we'll finally we'll discuss one of my research papers, so that is just accepted. So as the speaker also introduced, and presently I'm serving the associate editor of the following journals. So all the journals are the essay journals and having Q1 and Q2 tier journal. So the audience, if they wants to submit their good research papers to these journals, so all of you are welcome to submit your papers in these journals. So these are the few journals also I involved as an associate editor. Presently, I am doing the guest editorial for these 2 journals. One is Sustainability, published by MPDI. This is also a Q2 journal. And another journal, Cluster Computing, Springer. This is also my Q2 essay journal. So these 2 specialists who are accepting the submission, So if you have any good papers that fall within the scope and objective of this to special issue, so you can submit your papers to this to special issue. So now let us switch to our original discussion. So let us consider this picture. So this is a model for secure communication. So that means what actually we want? We want to share the message from one device to another device, maybe from one network to another network. So better to say there exists two participants, one is sender and another is recipient. They want to securely exchange a message. So what we need in this case, we need a algorithm, right? So that can convert your original message into some other form, so that an outsider, so other than the sender and the receiver, cannot understand the actual content of the message, because I want to hide the content of the message. So I want to achieve the confidentiality of the message, right? So at the sender side, I need one algorithm that will help to transfer my original message into in other form, that is called the ciphertext, and the original message is termed as a plain text, right? So in the receiver side, what we need, because receiver side we need that is we receive a message that is not the actual message, it is transferred message. That means there are some transformation, that is the algorithm, encryption algorithm. So in the receiver side, we need a decryption algorithm, right? So you can think about the encryption algorithm is suppose function f, and decryption algorithm is like f inverse. So it will just get back to the original message, right? So we need encryption and decryption algorithm. So to achieve that means this confidentiality, so what we need the encryption and decryption algorithm, that's fine. But in addition to that, because here you see the algorithm we cannot hide. It must be known to everyone. It is publicly available algorithm, right? So what is secret in this case? The key I use to encrypt a message, encrypt a plain text. So that is called the secret key. So in this model, to achieve the confidentiality, I need the encryption decryption algorithm. Along with I need a key that is secret, that is not known to the third party. That means other than the sender and the recipient. So the secret key is also a component of this communication. Then what we need, because here you see I am the sender, I want to encrypt a message using one key. So for the decryption purpose, the same key must be used. So how the sender will, how the receiver will know that key? So we need some kind of mechanism to deliver securely that key. That is called the key agreement protocol or key distribution protocol. So to achieve the secure communication over internet, what we need? We need the encryption decryption algorithm, a secret key, and a mechanism that can transfer the secret key between the sender and the recipient over any public channel. So why we need the key must be secure? The reason is that, so here the public channel that we are considering, that is called the Dole-Yao communication channel or Dole-Yao threat model. So what are the assumptions in this model? So what we assume, we can give the maximum capability to the adversary. So adversary means in between sender and receiver, a third party who is trying to capture your ciphertext, encrypted message, and try to recover your plain text, or if possible, or encryption key also. So in what way the adversary want to break this confidentiality, we are giving the power to the adversary. So that means we are actually giving the maximum power. What the way the adversary wants to break this security, adversary can do. So then what we mean by the capability of the adversary? It means the adversary can fully control this communication channel. It means the adversary can listen what is communication is going on. Adversary can block a message. Suppose you are sending a message to your friends, the adversary can capture it and it will just collect the message and just block it. Even the adversary has the power to fabricate it. That means it can alter or it can change the message. It can modify the message, and the modified message can be forwarded to the recipient. So in all way, the adversary can do it, right? So this is called the Dole-Wau threat model, and this is very famous model. In this model, we want to achieve the security for the message communication. So what else we want? We have the various cryptographic tools like symmetric key encryption. All of you are, I believe, the participants have knowledge about the symmetric key encryption and decryption. I think all of you heard about the AES, DES, IDEA, RC4 kind of symmetric key encryption algorithm. Participants? So, okay. So here I understand that the Alice and Bob they wants to send some message, right? So they have suppose the symmetric key, they are going to use the AES algorithm. So what we need? We need the secret key. So the secret key must be known to both Alice and the Bob, right? So in this case, we denote Alice is the sender. That means it will initiate the protocol. Protocol means we are talking about the key exchange protocol. So Bob is just a receiver, so it will just respond to the sender. So in key agreement protocol, so Alice will compute some partial key and Bob will also compute some partial key. So they will exchange their partial information with each other over the internet. And based upon their partial information, they will compute a final key, and that is only known to both the Alice and Bob. But any third party other than Alice and Bob cannot compute that key. So this way we want to achieve the secrecy of the key. Right? You might have questioned that why we should not physically transfer the key, because suppose Alice wants to Alice computes a secret key and then secretly delivers to Bob. But there is a question how the key will be secretly delivered. So there is many issues. So better to use the public channel and use the technology, right? And then you try to secretly transfer the key so that the key must be known to the Alice and Bob. So here is the role of the key agreement protocol. So in this regard, I want to point out that not only two party, if suppose you want to develop a 3-party protocol, yes, you want to develop a group key agreement protocol, that is also available. So to make our discussion simple, so I am concentrating on the 2-party key agreement protocol. So in this area, so Diffie and Hellman, they are the pioneer and of this key agreement protocol. They first proposed the 2-party unauthenticated version of the key agreement protocol and famously known as Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol. So let us understand so how this key agreement protocol is executed and what is the mathematics behind this protocol. And I will tell you why it is unauthenticated version and what is the problem with this unauthenticated version. So before exchanging the key, both the sender and receiver, this is nothing but a crypto system. So to initiate a crypto system, we need some information that is called the public parameters. So here, so one large prime number, cryptographically we are not dealing with the small numbers, we are dealing with the large prime numbers. Those who have the idea about like RSA crypto system, you can think about the public parameter value is at least 1024 bits. And in terms of digits, it must be near about 300 digits. So very large numbers we are dealing in cryptography. Okay, so let us talk about the prime number P. Suppose this is a prime number P and its type is called the safe prime. So I will tell you why we need the safe prime and what is the mathematics behind this. What is the logic behind this to choose a safe prime? Okay. So those people are quite familiar with the mathematics. They understand the group, cyclic group, right? So ZP star, this is a modular group. P is a prime number. Suppose I choose a integer x, I divide this x by P and take the remainder. Like P is 7. If I choose any number, then I divide by 7, then only I can get the remainder from 0 to 6. So this ZP will contain the element 0 to 6. As P is number, so ZP star, it only includes multiplicative that means invertible elements. So in this case, this is 1 to 6. Okay, so it has a generator G. It means with the help of the generator G, we can generate all the elements of ZP star. So these are the public parameters, large prime number, this group and its generator. So it is not known, only known to the sender and receiver, everyone, even adversary can also know, no issue at all. So how the actual key agreement protocol will be, the key agreement phase will be executed, please try to understand this. So here Alice will select a small number x, select a secret number x. It will calculate g to the power x mod p. Similarly, y also calculate g to the power y mod p, right, by choosing a number y. Then they will exchange. This is the partial key for y receiver and this is the partial key for the sender. They will exchange. And now here you see the beauty of this algorithm is that, so they are just sharing the partial information, but here they will be able to compute a secret key that is not known to the others. Here you see the secret key sk is equal to what he has received from the receiver, that is g to the power y to the power x, g to the power x. In the receiver side, it calculates k1 to the power y. K1 means received from the Alice, that is g to the power x. So finally here you see both the value will be same, g to the power x, y. So now we have a question. So how we can say that this algorithm is secure? Because we are talking about the cryptographic protocol, so it has to be secured from the adversary. Why does the adversary knows g to the power x, g to the power y, but the adversary will not be able to compute g to the power x, y. So here the security of this scheme depends upon a problem that is called the discrete logarithm problem. I will introduce later. So the security of this algorithm is discrete logarithm problem. But this protocol is unauthenticated version because it has one issue that is called the man in the middle error. It means a third party, suppose adversary, if is reading, that means it is listening the communication channel, right? So what the Alice is sending and Bob is sending, so he can capture them, he can modify them, everything like he wants, right? So here you see how the EV is able to calculate the key that is computed between Alice and Bob. So by protocol here you see g to the power x is sent by the sender. So if the third party just captured it, now what the adversary will do, it by more if will select a new number z, it calculates g to the power z. So instead of g to the power x, it will forward g to the power z to Bob. Now Bob receives g to the power z. So like Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol, so it creates g to the power y and it will forward to sender Alice. But in between this, he will compute it, captures it, and instead of g to the power y, it will just forward g to the power z. So here you see, by this adder, what the sender receives g to the power z, what the receiver receives g to the power z. But by protocol, the expected the receiver will expect to receive g to the power x, but in this case it receives g to the power z. The same, the Alice is receiving g to the power z, not g to the power y. So if it is, the say Alice will compute a key g to the power x z, Bob will calculate key g to the power. Sorry, this is a g to the power y z. Sorry, it is my mistake. So this should be g to the power y z. Here you see they are computing different key, but they are not aware that they are computing the different key. But here you see the beauty of this attack is that he will be able to compute both the key. It means if Alice encrypts a message using this g to the power z x and forwards to Bob, so it can capture that cipher text and it can decrypt by the, because this so middle party and it has the ability to compute all the key that is shared in between sender and receiver. So that is why this kind of attack is very, very serious attack. Now I have a question to the participant. So why you feel that this kind of attack is possible in this key agreement? What weaknesses you observed? Any idea, participants? The things that make sense to you? My question is clear to all? Okay, here you see, please try to understand. So here you see, Bob is expected to receive g to the power y, but it receives g to the power x, it receives g to the power j. So it means the message is modified. One thing, because here you see the same is true for Alice. Similarly, whenever Bob is computing the session key SK2, but before computing this key, Bob has no information on this message g to the power z is actually coming from Alice or from Eve. So Eve cannot identify the source. So these are the problems with this protocol. That is why it is unauthenticated version. So source authentication and the message authentication. These are the issues with this protocol. That is why man in the middle attack is possible. So what is the remedy? So we have to use another public key cryptographic tool that is called the digital signature. And I will show you later. So how the digital signature can be used with this protocol so that the man in the middle attack can be avoided. So let us first understand the discrete logarithm problem. So what do you mean by the discrete logarithm problem? So here you see, if G is a cyclic group and we denote G is a generator of this, it means, you know, all of you, the order of the group is of a G. It means this group has a number of elements. So if G is a generator and it is a multiplicative group, we can compute G to the power 0 mod n, G to the power 1 mod n up to G to the power n minus 1 mod n. This is the way we can generate all the elements. That means just the element of this group is nothing but G to the power some power. That is why it is cyclic group. So this group, so now in this group we can define the discrete logarithm problem. So suppose x is a number that is in between, right? So if we calculate y equal to G to the power x mod n. So here you see, try to understand this group is not, this is a small group. That means it has a very large number of elements, right? So if you know what is G and you know what is Y, this tuple is given to you. If I ask you to compute this x, and this is called the discrete logarithm problem, because you know from this relation you can write what is x. By mathematics we can write this is discrete logarithm of y base g, right? But you cannot compute this discrete logarithm because why? This group has very large number of elements. And I will give you the example of few algorithms, those actually try attempt to solve this discrete logarithm problem by polynomial type. I think as a computer scientist we understand what is a polynomial time algorithm and what is non-polynomial or exponential time algorithm. Right. So what we are trying to say, there is just no polynomial time algorithm, polynomial, right? P class problem, deterministic algorithm that can solve the discrete logarithm problem. So what is discrete logarithm problem? So that means y equal to g to the power x mod s n is given. We want to calculate what is x. And we do not have any deterministic polynomial time algorithm. So that is why we assume this problem is hard, computationally hard. It is not solvable. We assume it, but we do not have any proof that the development of such algorithm is not possible. Now all of you know this is a that means this is a open problem. So for example, suppose I have chosen a group Z97 star where P is 97, a prime number. So it has an element from 1 to 96. So n is 96. So its generator is G to the power 5. So I think if the participant do not understand what is the cyclic group generator, so I advise the participants to read the abstract mathematics or modern algebra. So where this is very basic things: group, ring, field, cyclic group, order of an element, kind of things, right? So here you see from this, this is y 35. This is actually equal to 5 to the power 32. This 32 is x. I want to know what is this x 32. So how can you calculate it? So this is a hard problem. mathematically hard problem or computationally hard problem. So now we can generalize the attempt to solve this discrete logarithm problem. So the first attempt, or you can say the naive approach, that is called the exhaustive search, because we know the element of this group is like this, g to the power 0. I am not writing the mod, like g to the power n minus 1. So this is a very large number, the group, and that means it has a very large number of elements. So that is why, suppose I want to find out what is this x. This g to the power x is given to me. I want to know what is x. So what I can want, I know g. So first I calculate g to the power 0, whether it is equal to g to the power x. If it is, so I can output x equal to 0. If not, I can go for next g to the power, is it equal to g to the power x? If yes, then I can go for, I can output x equal to 1. So this is the naive approach or exhaustive search approach. But for this approach, what is the time complexity? Here you see the number of element of this group is n. So the time complexity is order of n. So here n is a very large number. We can represent in terms of bit. Suppose this n is its bit length is at least 1024 bits. So here you see its complexity will be 2 to the power t. As n is very large number, so that is why it is exponential. So this strategy will not work to solve the discrete logarithm problem. I think all of you understand the approach, right? So now another very famous algorithm, that is called the baby step giant step algorithm, and it is proposed by Danielson, an American mathematician. So this is also not the polynomial time algorithm, but this is a sub-exponential time algorithm, right? But it is quite famous because that means to solve the discrete logarithm problem, few attempts out of the attempts. So this is very famous algorithm. So please try to understand the overview of this algorithm. So what actually we want? We want g to the power, that means g we know, and g to the power x it is given. So from which we want to know what is x. So in this algorithm, what it will do? So here you see the order of the group is n. So in exhaustive search, what we want? We want to calculate g to the power 0 in worst case g to the power n minus 1. So n number of computation we have to perform. But in baby step giant step algorithm, instead of n computation, we can perform less computation. So here we defined m is equal to square root of n, ceiling value. You know, if it is fraction, it is converted into next integer. So like if n is suppose 100, so m is equal to square root of 100, so it is 10. So you know, in exhaustive search you have to compute the 100 computation, but here we have to compute only the constant factor of square root of n, that is 10. So obviously it will be faster, but still it is sub-exponential time. So in this case, what do we want? In this case, we want to compute two lists, L1 and L2. So in L1, we will compute the comparatively smaller value. And in L2, we will compute the comparatively the larger value. That is why the name is baby step, giant step. Here the giant step, larger value, and here the small value, baby step, right? So what do we want? In this case, so we split x is equal to mj plus I, mj, m into j, right? Then if we write the relation y is equal to g to the power x is like y equal to g to the power mj plus I. So what do we want? We want to compute in list L1. Here we want to compute g to the power mj is equal to y into g to the power minus I. So we will compute this value and compute this value. This value will be computed in L1, m into j, and in L2 we want to compute y into g to the power minus I. Right? So what is I and j? I and j will be ranges from 0 to m minus 1. So here you see only n values. So instead of n values. So here you see for certain I and j in list L1, suppose for some j, I got g to the power mj is equal to y in, that means y into g to the power minus I. So that means here some value of j, index j, and here for some index I, this is I and this is g into alpha to the power minus I. So these two value will be same. So we found a match. If they are same, so from here you can deduce y is equal to e to the power mj plus I, and that is nothing but x. So instead of calculating x, what we calculate? We calculate first m. Yes, it is easily computable. Then we are calculating two index j and I. If we are able to compute I and j, then we can compute x, and that is the discrete log. So this is the logic behind this algo, right? I think the participant can understand the algorithm. So now here you see the complexity. So what is the steps that what we want? We want a list L1 and L2. So to make our search efficient, we have to sort both the algorithm list. So we need some sorting algorithm. So m values, you know, to sorting algorithm, suppose you are applying the quick sort, so the complexity is m log m time, right? So where m is square root of n, that means 2 to the power this value. So m into something, so this is 2 to the power, so time complexity will be actually 2 to the power t by 2. So that is why it is sub exponential. So this is a good attempt, but it is not a polynomial time algorithm, right? So this is one attempt, and another attempt that is called the Foley-Hellman algorithm. So this is also another way to break the discrete logarithm problem, but it has also certain limitation. So here, so in this group, here you see we assume that order of n is p minus 1, and here if this n has a smooth factors, you know the factorization problem. So here n, if I assume its factor, suppose p1 prime it occurs u1 times, p2 it occurs e2 times. Suppose there are k factors and their repetition is u1 e2 ek. So what we want, if n has the small factors, and that is called the b smooth factors. It means for a given bound b and all the factors are less than or equal to bi. So suppose b is suppose n is 100 and I am giving b is suppose less than or equal to 7. So that means all the prime factors, they are less than or equal to 7. So if n has the small factors, then only this attack is possible, otherwise not. Right? So yeah, the complexity of this Foley-Hellman attack is this is log n square plus b log 2 base n, these operations. But how can we avoid this Foley-Hellman attack if we use a safe prime? So this p is safe, then the Foley-Hellman attack is not possible. So what is safe prime? The definition of the safe prime is if p is a prime number, we can express this p is k into q plus 1. Well, q is also a prime number. So it means p minus 1 is completely divisible by this k, and that is a prime number q. And this kind of prime is called the safe prime. And simplest form of the safe prime is 2q plus 1, where q is also a prime number. So if we choose this p is a safe prime, then Foley-Hellman attack is not possible. So that is why to avoid this Foley-Hellman attack, we choose the safe prime in this setup case. So why we use the safe prime? Just to avoid the Foley-Hellman attack. So as a designer, whenever we are choosing the parameters, so you must be careful. So in this case, you choose the safe prime. So I think the things is clear why we choose the safe prime. So these are the few examples to solve the discrete logarithm problem, right? Yeah. So the discrete logarithm assumption. So what we assume, because we do not have any deterministic polynomial time algorithm. So to compute, suppose B is a probabilistic polynomial time algorithm, and if g and g to the power x is given, what we expect to get x, and that is not possible because we do not have any deterministic algorithm, and even in no probabilistic polynomial time algorithm can solve this problem. So what is its probability? Its probability is negligible, right? We are not saying impossible, but it is very, very small. So this is called the discrete logarithm problem assumption. We assume that this problem is computationally hard. That is why we use this discrete logarithm problem to design some crypto protocols like Diffie-Hellman key-agreement protocol. Now we come to the Diffie-Hellman key-agreement protocol, why it is secure. Because Alice shared g to the power x. If I able to extract this x from here, then yes, I can easily compute key x because g to the power y is known. if I know what is x by discrete log problem, then I can compute yes z to the power xy. So that is why the discrete logarithm problem is hard. We know computation of x from z to the power x or computation of y from z to the power y is not possible. That is why it is secret. But the other way we can attack the protocol by man in the middle attack. Similarly, the computational Diffie-Hellman assumption, please try to understand this problem. So in Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol, the Alice sent z to the power x and Bob's sent z to the power y. So from here, what the Alice and Bob's calculate z to the power xy. If I developed a algorithm that is probabilistic polynomial time algorithm B, where I give z to the power x and z to the power y, if I ask you to calculate z to the power xy, and that is called the computational Diffie-Hellman problem or CDHP problem. But we do not have any probabilistic polynomial time algorithm. There is no question about the deterministic algorithm we don't have. So that is why we are telling that this computational Diffie-Hellman problem is also hard. So the probability to break this discrete logarithm problem by a probabilistic polynomial time algorithm is also negligible. So this is called the CDH assumption. We assume that we cannot break this, but we do not have any proof that we cannot develop such an algorithm, right? So based upon, there are many other computational hard problems in cryptography. So if you look into any of the crypto systems, so they are built on some computational hard problem. So now, as I said, we can overcome the weaknesses in the Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol by introducing the digital signature. So what is that protocol? This protocol is called the station-to-station protocol, right? So this is actually developed by Desmet. So this is the improvement of the Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol, and it can protect the min and the middle attack. It uses the timestamp. And it can also provide the perfect forward secrecy. You know, forward secrecy, it is connection with the session key that we computed in Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol. It means suppose the sender and receiver in many sessions they are computing different session key. Forward secrecy means if any of the session key is leaked, the future session key will not be affected. That is called the forward secrecy. Similarly, the backward secrecy means if the current session key is leaked, the past session key computed, they will not be affected. It means their secrecy remains, that means they remain secure. So the station-to-station protocol will provides both the property, perfect forward secrecy and the backward secrecy also. It also provides that is called the explicit key confirmation. I'll tell you what do you mean by the explicit key confirmation. Those actually have the interest in the authenticated key agreement protocol, they must understand this attack, the explicit key confirmation property, perfect forward secrecy, backward secrecy. These are the very important in this domain. So here we try to understand the overview of this station-to-station protocol. So like Diffie-Hellman key agreement protocol, Alice sends z to the power x, Bob calculates z to the power y, and what he has received x, it chooses a y and then it calculates the session key. Then it will create a signature. I'll tell you how this signature is created. Please try to understand this is a signature. You know, suppose you have an envelope. To make this envelope is actually not tempered by some other. So what you did, you just signed in the, that means in the envelope, right? So that if anyone try to open the envelope, then they will breach your signature. So just by observing the breaching the signature, you can understand, yes, the envelope is tempered. So that we are doing here digitally. So it will create a signature, right? So what we do, it will send z to the power y. With it will encrypt this signature by the session key k, and it will send the public key certificate of the Bob. I'll tell you what is the public key certificate later. Okay, so it received by the Alice. So Alice compute the session key because it received z to the power y, it knows x, z to the power xy. Then it will decrypt this to get the signature from here. See. Then it has some verification algorithm. I'll tell you later how it will be verified. Then by verifying this, it will get assured that his signature is correct. Then what the message he has received from the Bob, that is correct. And that will also give the guarantee that yes, this message is actually received by Bob, because for the verification of the signature, the public key of Bob is involved. To create the signature, private key of the signer, in this case Bob, is involved. So that will assure yes, that message is created by Bob, not by other one. Okay, if this message is correct, the Alice will create its own signature on G to the power X and Y. It will send this signature in encrypted form and its public key certificate. Then the receiver, the Bob, will first verify the signature. If the signature is correct, so Bob understand that what he has received, that is correct. That means both of them secured that both of them exchange G to the power X, G to the power Y, and the integrity is achieved. Source authentication is achieved. If it is, they assume this G to the power XY is a correct. So here you see, here the public is involved and also the signature policy is involved to thread the man in the middle attack. Right? So now we have to understand, so what are the things that we involve? So this is the notation. Here A means this is the private key of Alice. This is the private key of Bob. This is the PUA means public key of Alice, and this is Bob. And here you see, we are just giving the example of the RSA based signature. So participant, I think you are understanding all these things I am discussing. Any question or any issue? Okay, fine. So here you see, this is a signature for RSA based signature. I think all of you are familiar with the RSA encryption scheme. So here you see, so I am the signer. My private key is suppose X. Sorry, my private key is public key G and private key is D. For RSA based signature, E into D is congruent to 1 mod of phi of N. So what is N? N is a product of two large prime numbers and they are sacred, whereas N is prime. N is public, right? So you know the one of the problem that is called the integer factorization problem. It means a large number N that is a product of two prime number. You do not know what is P and Q, but if I ask you to output P and Q, you cannot do it because we do not have any polynomial time algorithm that can efficiently factorize N. So based upon this IFP problem, RSA crypto system is designed. So in RSA crypto system, we can create a signature. I want to create a signature for a message M. So what I will do, I will raise M to the power D mod N. D is my secret key. So only I can create my signature. My signature you cannot create. Similarly, your signature I cannot create because I do not know what is your secret key. So how this signature, this is the signature signing process. So what is the verification process? So here I raise because the public, my public is known to everyone. So anyone can verify my signature. So they will raise the sigma to the power E. It means M to the power D into E. Mathematically, if you see the RSA algorithm, so they will just congruent to 1. So this is M to the power 1. So it will calculate and you will get actually the original M. So here you see which M is used here. Suppose you are denoting this is M prime. So what you have recovered from signature and what is used in the signature, if they are same, then you can say this signature is correct. Otherwise signature is incorrect. Now here you see, in creation my private key is involved. In verification my public key is involved. So the signature cannot be verified by your public key. So this will give you guarantee that yes, this is my signature. That is because my public key is used to verify it. Otherwise others public key will not help you to verify it. That will give you the source authentication. So who actually sent this signature? I sent this signature. Right? Similarly, here the notation, this is the symmetric key encryption under the common key K, symmetric key decryption D under the common key K. So here certificate, public key certificate of Alice and public key certificate of Bob. So why you need the public key certificate? Please try to understand. So here you see, I have the public and private key. I publicly now know this is my public key. But how can you believe that this is a public key of mine? This is my public key, right? So we need some that means approval from some trusted agency, right? So that is called a public key certificate. Suppose I am affiliated with the IIIT Kalyani. So TIIT Kalyani will give me the bona fide certificate that yes, I am the employee of this institution. So that will be my certificate. So if I show this certificate, then yes, you can understand, yes, I am affiliated with this institution. But other who is not employee here, they cannot get that certificate. So some trusted authority will authenticate your public key by providing some digital certificate. So in the public key certificate, what we include? My public key, my identifier. So like my employee ID, maybe my email ID, maybe my Aadhaar card, maybe my passport number, right? So that from that we can identify the owner, who is the owner of this certificate. And the whole block is digitally signed by a trusted third party, like my institution. So here, trusted third party means some government, that means government approved that agency. So such example is like VeriSign. So they are the agency to issue the certificate, Entrust, SafeCrypt, right? So they are the various agency, they can issue the public certificate. So they are the third party, but they are the trusted party. So now, so what are the requirements of the public key certificate? So public key certificate means, suppose I am the user. My friends want to use my public key. So how my friends will know my genuine public key? I will share my certificate to my friends. After verifying the certificate, my friend can understand what is the genuine public key. So that means any participant can transfer to the others his or her public key certificate. And any participant can read your public key certificate and can identify the public key from the certificate. Any participant can verify the certificate and they can get assured that yes, this is a genuine public key certificate and that is signed by some trusted third party. Like that we denoted as certificate authority CA. So who can create? Only trusted certificate authority, not any other third party. So here you see, a certificate cannot be valid for ever. So we need some validity period, that is called the currency of the certificate. So we can achieve this just by including the timestamp. Suppose you are putting the timestamp, this certificate is valid from 1st April 2022, 31st March 2021. So that is the timestamp or called the currency. So this is actually, this concept is provided by the Denning in 1983. So these are the things that is the requirement of the public key certificate. So please first understand how the public key certificate is actually distributed. So here you see this is the third party certificate and suppose this user A and user B. So user A will personally go to the certificate authority, prove his credential, then the certificate authority will issue a certificate CA. So this is the certificate, means it will encrypt, or that means this is a RSA type signature. So you know it will be encrypted by the private key of the certificate authority. This is the validity period timestamp T1. This is the identity of the user A, and this is the public key of user A. So that is signed by the certificate authority, and that is nothing but the certificate of A. Similarly, B also get the same A certificate. So B will personally meet to the certificate authority and can get a certificate copy. So whenever B wants to use the public key of A, so B will first make a request to A, please provide your certificate. Then A will send the certificate. So B will verify it, get assured that yes, this is the correct certificate, and it can get the certificate from this, a public key from this certificate, and can use it. The same way, B certificate will share with A, and A can get the public key from this certificate and can use it. So this is very common for the issuing a certificate, that is quite difficult task. And there are lots of security issues, and that will be managed by the certificate authority. So why the validity or the timestamp is important? Suppose the certificate of A is leaked. It is not expired, but it is leaked, right? So and a certificate or leaked means it private key and the is leaked. So that is why this public key is suppose known by some third party. So that third party knows the private key of A, accidentally it is leaked, and any other party other than A can use that private key and can decrypt all the message that is actually sent to A. because that private key is leaked to the third party. So how to protect this? So A will go to the certificate authority. It will create a new public key, private key, and can get a new certificate. And certificate authority will display that this old certificate is obsolete. So this is just a that means notification to the other opponent. Those are going to use the public key, old public key of A. So that is why the timestamp is also important. So here you see for some example of the public key certificate. This is as per the X.50. This is the standard. This is the standard format of the public key certificate. So what are the things included? Here currently the version of the public key certificate is version 3. So here you see, like this is a version number, certificate serial number. You are using a certificate authority issue a certificate, so it will provide some unique number. So here, which algorithm, signing algorithm, and what are the parameters is involved, both are the things is put it here. Issuer name, right? So issuer means who is issuing, certificate authority is VeriSign, Entrust or SafeCrypt, who issued his name. So this is the validity period to and from, and this is the subject name means username for whom this certificate is issued. So which algorithm is used to create the public key? Like suppose you are using the RSA certificate, this algorithm is put it here. Suppose you have created the public key and private key using the Elgamal technique. So you are putting the information about Elgamal technique. So issuer unique identifier, issuer identity, like my employee ID. Subject unique identity, issuer identifier means certificate authority. Subject unique identifier means user unique identifier. And these are the various extensions used for the special purpose. And this is the signing algorithm information. So if you looked into the right hand side diagram here, you see this is a format of the public key certificate. Version here, version 3, serial number is given. So I have just taken this picture from the one website. So each and website they are using the public and private key certificate. So you can easily verify which public key and public key certificate is actually used, right? So these are the various fields that is given in the public key. So here I have just taken the public key. This is the form of the public key. Very large in the hexadecimal format. Very large number is used as a public key, right? So participants up to now, what I have discussed. Do you have any questions? Any questions from participant? Am I audible to all? Participants? Organizers? Am I audible?
Yes,
No.
sir.
The things I'm discussing, it is that make sense to you? Okay. So what is the limitation of the public key certificate? Here you see, I want to develop a defilement key agreement protocol, but what I need, I have to authenticate the public key and private key. So for this, we need the additional infrastructure. Who will actually maintain all this? The creation of the public key certificate, validation, storage, delivery, everything. So we need the separate entity that is called the public key infrastructure, PKI. So all of you are familiar with the PKI, right? So these are separate. Suppose you are designing a new digital signature algorithm. So for this, you need the separate infrastructure that is called the public infrastructure. That is a burden on this system. So that means the computation related to the public key certificate is a burden in this system, public key PKI system. So just to overcome this, the Samir has given a concept in 1984 that is called the identity-based crypto system. So what is the beauty of this concept? Your public key is that means your identity, publicly available identity will be used as a public key. Suppose my employee ID that is already authenticated by my organization. So why I need the separate certificate? So if there is a way to use my employee ID as a public key, yes, I can use it. Right? No need to authenticate again. So how to compute the private key of the user? So in this case, the user will not compute the private key. Some trusted third party, suppose my organization will create the private key, my private key, and given to me. Then I can use it. So the third party who is actually creating the private key, that is called the private key generator or key generator center. Right? So as a user, I will first go to the PKG and ask to issue the private key based upon my publicly available identity. And so the computation of the private key will be that means communication between PKG and the user in the secure channel. So this is one-time process. Right. So here one important crypto tool that is used, that is called the bilinear pairing. So here this G actually today I'm discussing this. So previously I have planned to discuss the elliptic curve lecture first, then this lecture. So due to certain problem, I changed my schedule. So tomorrow I will discuss about the elliptic curve. So if you face any difficulty to understand what is the elliptic curve, please keep your patience for tomorrow lectures, right? So please try to understand this. G is a set of elliptic curve points and it is an additive elliptic curve group. And this G is a multiplicative group. Both have the same order, number of elements. Then we can define a bilinear pairing from group GQ to GM. So it has three properties. Bilinearity. If P and Q are the elements to elliptic curve points or the J are the any points in this group, then we can compute E of A times P. P is a point coordinate point and B is a integer or scalar. If this, so it should be e to the power P comma Q to the power AB. Non-degeneracy means P, Q to any two points and they will not be mapped to the identity element of GM. It means if P and Q are the generator of this, then it will be equal to IM, otherwise not. Computability means to calculate, because here you see to compute it, there are many types of pairing operations like Tate pairing, 8 pairing, bilinear pairing. There are many pairings, right? So there must be an efficient algorithm, means polynomial time, deterministic polynomial time algorithm that can compute this value. So this is a pairing I will use in on crypto system. So this is a famous identity-based encryption, public key encryption based upon the identity-based crypto system, and this is very, very famous. This is published in 2003. Right? So Samir has given the concept, but they are not able to design the public key encryption technique. But Boney and Franklin in 2003, they designed the public key crypto system. So first they will generate the public parameters. So this is a field of prime order Q. So like ZQ star. So this is the elliptic curve group, group of points, and this is the elliptic curve group, and this is a multiplicative group, and this P is a generator of this group GQ. And this is a bilinear map. So here a secret key S is chosen by the PKG, and this is the public key S into P, the public key of the PKG. So here you see the form of the elliptic curve. Just try to understand it. It is y square mod q is congruent to ax plus b mod q. So here you see it will give a point P is a coordinate xy. I'll tell you the geometrical significance and how we are adding 2 points PQ, or how we are adding 2 same points, or when we are performing K into P. K is a scalar. Suppose 5 into P. P is a coordinate point. So how these things will be calculated, that we'll discuss in the tomorrow's session. Right. So this is the way, that means this is suppose S is 5 into P. So this is a public. Right. So here, like discrete logarithm problem in multiplicative group G to the power X, from here you cannot calculate X. So this is also the discrete logarithm problem in elliptic curve. So you know Kp, you know P, but from here you cannot extract K. So this is called the elliptic curve discrete logarithm problem, ECDLP. So this is secured due to discrete logarithm problem in elliptic curve. So these are the public parameters publicly available. So those who are the cryptographic student, they can understand these two are the hash function, cryptographic hash function. And here you see this hash function is special hash function that is actually designed by the Boolean and Franklin. This is not the ordinary hash function. This is called the map to point hash function. So what is the beauty? It will take a random string and it will generate a elliptic curve point. But the general hash function will take a random string, then it will create a string of fixed length, suppose length n. But here this h1, it will take a random string, but it will create a elliptic curve point, suppose p, not a random string. So how this actually designed? So I request all of you to read these research papers, and they have nicely explained everything with example, right? So this is called map to point hash function. This is a special hash function. So now, as I said, based upon the identity, how the user will get the identity based private key. So the first, So here user first go to the PKG and submit his identity. Then the PKG will compute the identity based private key. So based upon the identity, so first it will calculate hash of identity. You know, your identity is suppose random string, so it is nothing but a elliptic curve point. So like P and Q, then it will multiply the secret key of the PKG. Now it will be treated as a identity based private key. And what is the identity based public key? QID, that is hash of identity. So this hash function is publicly available. Your identity is publicly available. So anyone can compute your public key. So that is why here we do not need any certificate authority to authenticate this public key, because your identity is already authenticated. So we do not need any certificate. And all the computation on all the problems related to the certificate is resolved here. But it has an issue, because your private key is computed by third party. If the third party is not trusted, so your private key can be misused. So in this case, we assume that PKG or key generation center is a fully trusted entity. But if it is partially trusted, we have many approaches to overcome to make the system is secure. So that is not the in today's discussion. So in future I may discuss it. Okay. So user submits his identity to PKG and PKG will give the identity based private key to the user. Now user get the private key and it can use it. So now here you see this is very simple algorithm, just how to encrypt the message. So this is my aim message. I want to encrypt it. So how as a sender I do it? I select a number R from the set. This is look like a random number, randomly chosen value. Then the ciphertext is R times P, comma, M, jar of hash value of this. Here you see this is the pairing. This is the public key of the receiver. I want to send a message to my friend. So you know the principle of the public key encryption. So the public key of receiver will be used. In this case, this is the public key of the receiver. This IDI is the identity of the receiver, and this is the public key of PKG to the power R. So this is the ciphertext. So here you see behind this public key, the corresponding private key is known to the receiver. So a receiver can use its or her private key and can decrypt the ciphertext to get the original message. So how the receiver will do? So it will just, this is B. B is nothing but this component. We denoted this is B and this is G, right? So B is your hash of, here you see the private key of the receiver is used. So that is why who can only decrypt? Receiver, not any other party. So the correctness here you see in the sender side, it is that means receiver side it is done by DID means S into hash of identity RP. So it means this is also due to bilinear property, it will goes to the power, and then this power is come to this due to bilinear pairing. So here you see this is nothing but QID public key of R. So this value is actually computed in a B, QID to the power R. The same value we are able to compute by the receiver. So receiver just jar with this value to the power N. So receiver will be jar. This means value of this is nothing but this value. So finally we can recover. So this is the way the receiver will recover this message. So this is the way the decryption takes place in identity-based encryption. So due to time, we do not have time to discuss the complete security discussion, but we can give an idea as to how this scheme is secured. So based upon the one computational problem that is called the bilinear Diffie-Hellman assumption. So what is this bilinear Diffie-Hellman assumption? So all the public parameters is known to you and you know one bilinear pairing E. So what is the tuple is given to you? You have given suppose P, A times P, B times P and C times P. If I ask you to calculate E of P comma P to the power A, B, C, you cannot do it because there is no deterministic as well as probabilistic algorithm A that can compute this value from this given tuple. Right? So this is called bilinear Diffie-Hellman assumption. Right? So or BDH. This is very famous computational hard problem. So based upon this BDH problem, this IBE scheme is secured. So I suggest you to read the Boney and Franklin paper. Any questions, the audience? Any questions from your side, audience? So now I'll describe one of my paper in this domain. So that is also identity based two-party authenticated key ignorance protocol, and this paper is published recently in IEEE system journals. So here, a setup page, what we are doing certain parameters, we are calculating certain parameters. A large prime number Q, this is a elliptic curve group G, G1 is a multiplicative group, P is a generator, E is a bilinear pairing operation, and both the hash function here we have used, that is the general hash function, right? Not the map to hash point hash function. And this P naught is nothing but a public key of the PKG, S into P, right? So S into P. So we have changed our key generation page slightly, that means different way. So here Qi is equal to hash of IDI. In this case, this is a random string, not elliptic curve point. But how the private key is computed here, S by S plus Qi times P. So finally here you see, due to A, as S is secret and it is only known to PKG, so you cannot, or any other party other than PKG cannot compute it. So this private key is given to the user PI securely. So this is the identity and this is the private key of the user. Now the key agreement page, like Diffie-Hellman, we use the elliptic curve based key agreement protocol. So here, like X, the Alice to just say number R1, it computes G to the power X, like it is R1 into P, and it creates a signature. This is a signature. R1 times the private public key, the P are the private key of the user. Similarly, Bob will do the same thing. It selects a new number R2 and it will create psi2 and a sigma2 signature. And they will exchange psi1 sigma 1 and psi2 sigma 2. So here you see, Alice received this psi2 sigma 2. It will first verify the sigma 2. That means signature. If the signature is correct, it means psi2 is also correct. So this is the verification equation. Right? I will tell you the correctness of the signature. If this equation is correct, so it means the psi2 is correct. If psi2 is correct, it will create X is equal to like G to the power XY. So in this case, what we calculate? Elliptic curve base. So in this case here you see the Alice knows R1, it receives R2 into P, simply it will multiply. Then the final value session key will be R1 R2 P. Similarly, Bob will do, it knows R2 and it receives R1 P, it will multiply it. It will get R1 R2 P. Right? So like this is G to the power R1 R2 and like this is G to the power R1 R2. Right? So here you see here the session key is a hash of both their identity, both the psi1, psi2 and this X. Here X is the actual secret. Right. So first we verify the signature to make from where this message is actually originating. Why you are using the signature? Just to protect the man in the middle letter. Right? The same is done by the Bob. So if it is, then the exchange of both the messages, they are not altered and they are not coming from the untrusted source. So Alice understand that yes, this message is coming from Bob. Bob understand that yes, this message is coming from Alice, and the received message is not altered, not tampered. So this is the correctness. So here, because before using the message, we first verify the signature. So here you see sigma I comma p naught plus qi. So it means we are putting the value of sigma I. So sigma I means Ri into private key. So private key is by S plus qi this. And this is the p naught, that means S into p, and this is qip. So S plus qip. So from the bilinear property, the entire things goes out. This is entire things goes out. So here S plus qi cancel. So finally R into Si here. So this S goes out and it will again come to here due to bilinear property. So it means this is psi I and this is P naught. So verification equation is correct. And then the computation of the secret key is also correct. So here two security notion we achieved. One is called the mutual authentication. Why you need the mutual authentication? Because I want to verify from whom I received the message. So both the party wants to verify. It is coming from Bob. Alice wants to verify. So that is the mutual authentication. Because mutual authentication is required to avoid the man in the middle attack. Similarly, authenticated key agreement, that means what the key I compute, that is the correct key, right? So that is called the authenticated key agreement security. So both the things I achieved, and we analyze the probable security or the details mathematical security in our paper. So here we see the key agreement. So here you see that is called the computational development problem, elliptic curve based. So the secrecy of the secret session key is achieved due to computational elliptic curve computational defilement problem, and the mutual authentication property due to bilinear defilement assumption. Right. So these two proofs already have given in our paper. So based upon this, we can assume that this protocol is secure, and also in this protocol we do not have to use any certificate authority. So all the burdens related to the public key certificate is avoided. So thank you to all. This is the talk, and please welcome if you have any questions from the participants. Any questions? Audience? Hello.
Dear participants, if you have any question, please ask.
Not only this talk related to cryptography, you have any question, do not hesitate, please ask. So from the organizer, any questions, any doubt? Okay, I believe the audience got all this. Okay, so thank you for listening me, and thank you to the organizer for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful session.
Thank you. So, may I leave?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So, dear participants, we will meet tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for our next session. We will continue this session on there. Thank you so much.